What's happening? Thanks for joining me. As always, it is much appreciated on this Tuesday. Free agency marches on, ready for day two. We start with a look back at day one, and we ask you the question, have the Patriots been quote-unquote Belichickian? And we asked that question because I was reading Andrew Callahan, a friend of the podcast, on the Herald last night. I was watching our stuff that we've talked about in the past with him, and then I was, reading what he had to write last night at the Boston Herald. And it was a pretty interesting take by Callahan. And I've seen some other people say this, that the Patriots have been Belichickian. Here's Callahan. You want a real surprise? The Patriots front office, now under new leadership and following a different scouting system, executed the same old playbook on day one of free agency. That's right. Bill Belichick's value over everything playbook. How else could you read the Pats opening salvo Monday? Well, I read it differently, which I'll get into in a minute. Urgency may be lost on the Patriots during negotiations with lower-level players. Agents for some of these players recently vented to the Herald that Wolf's front office has been playing hardball, more evidence of working the count as Belichick often did. The Patriots played it slow for most of Monday, then hit big on Onwenu and smacked a single with Brissett. Belichick somewhere is smiling. The rest of free agency, however, the Patriots must pivot from his old playbook. It's time to keep spending, pushing, and hunting for bigger and better talent. This front office cannot afford to strike out looking with this roster and franchise in its current state. So, have the Patriots been Belichickian early on in free agency? I've got a hard disagree with my man Andrew Callahan. Let's first start off with the wide receiver position. What is not Belichickian is having discussions with top-tier wide receivers. It is getting into discussions with Mike Evans' agents, as Callahan pointed out during his own podcast late last week, the Pats Interference podcast. Andrew does a fantastic job. The Patriots were legitimately serious about going after Mike Evans. That's not Belichickian. They were serious about going after Michael Pittman. That's not Belichickian. Right now, it looks like it is them, the Jaguars, and according to Jonathan Jones of CBS, a mystery team that is in on Calvin Ridley. Again, I tell you, that is not Belichickian. All of these things are not Belichickian. If you're chasing top-tier wide receivers on the market, that is something that Belichick never did. He never did that. I also look at this waiting it out and wonder if they truly are waiting it out. Are the Patriots just sitting back with the same old playbook, waiting for guys to come to them? Or have the Patriots been forced to wait out this market? And what I mean by that is, if you look at the offensive tackle market, Tyron Smith still available. Jonah Williams still available. Mekhi Becton still available. The top-tier offensive tackles that are on this market are still there. They're still waiting to sign with somebody. You look at wide receiver. Lots of wide receiver talent is still out there. Michael Pittman, Mike Evans, as we know, they're staying. T. Higgins wants to be traded. But Calvin Ridley is still available. So are the Patriots sitting on their hands being Belichickian and waiting the market out? Or is the market forcing them to be patient because it's a slow-moving market? Free safety, same kind of situation. Cornerback, same kind of situation. And when you specifically look at the offensive tackle and wide receiver markets, what we have to appreciate, we've talked about this in past podcasts, if you want to see depth, and by the way, Mike Gesicki signed a deal with the Cincinnati Bengals 1 year worth up to $3.25 million, so Gesicki has moved on. Not a surprise. But if you look at offensive tackle and you look at wide receiver in the draft, both positions are very, very deep. And so I think it's rather obvious what's happening here. The tackles who are looking for money and the wide receivers who are not Evans and Pittman and Higgins, the other guys, Calvin Ridley, Curtis Samuel, other names that we'll get to in a little bit. Those guys want to get paid. And I think teams are drawing a hard line with how much they're willing to pay tackles and wide receivers because they're looking at the draft and they're saying, why should we pay player X when we can get player Y in the draft, right? Why are you going to go overboard and sign a receiver for $3 or $4 million more than you want to per season when you can look at the draft and you can justifiably say, well, do we have to necessarily pay that guy that much when we can land a really, really good receiver in the draft? What's the point of doing that, right? I'll give you a hypothetical. Let's say the Patriots are comfortable spending $18 million a year on Calvin Ridley. Let's say Ridley wants 21, 22 million. Michael Pittman got what? About 23 million from Indy with his deal. So what if Calvin Ridley is looking for Michael Pittman money? The Patriots are going to say, wait, we want to pay this guy 18 million. He wants 22, 23 million. We can draw the hard line because at 34, we can draft a young receiver, or we can move into the late first round and draft that receiver. Tyron Smith might be looking for more money than teams are comfortable paying him. So teams look at this and they say, well, why are we going to pay Tyron Smith all the money that he wants when we can sit there and dangle the draft as leverage? We could talk to Tyron Smith's crew and say, look, man, offensive tackle is ridiculously deep. So there's no urgency. There's no urgency for teams to go out there and spend more money than they want on receiver and tackle right now. And I think that's why we're looking at wide receivers and tackles, not much movement going on. I mean, Gabe Davis went to Jacksonville, but there's still a lot of names that are available. And the priorities. I mean, when we look at the Patriots and we try to sit there and say that, they're being Belichickian right now, again, it all depends. It all depends on what your priority is. The Patriots, we know, walking into this free agency period, wide receiver and tackle were the top two priorities, right? We felt that offensively, tackle and wide receiver were the two positions that you absolutely needed, especially after signing Hunter Henry and getting a tight end on your roster. So the Patriots, their two top needs, it just so happens that they're two of the slowest markets developing right now in free agency. So is the Patriots sitting back and playing this slow? Or is this the idea of tackle, wide receiver, drafts are very deep in each of those classes? So now teams are kind of in a stalemate with these guys, with these players, with these wide receivers and with these tackles. It's a stare down. The tackles and receivers want more money. These teams know that they could draft a tackle and a receiver in the draft, so they're not necessarily pushing forward quickly on this. All right. Before we continue, I don't mind the Patriots being patient in waiting out this market to kind of settle down and for these guys to realize they might not be worth as much as they think they're worth given the draft. More thoughts in a minute. First, a word from our sponsor, Nick Cattle Show, brought to you by First Class Glazing. If you need your bathroom renovated and or that bathtub glazed, check out First Class Glazing. Expert craftsmen dedicated to delivering top-tier results using premium materials, precise techniques. That bathroom space that you and or your lady has always wanted, well, you can have it. Visit First Class Glazing online at firstclassglazing.com. Or you can give Jose a call at 617-849-0513, 617-849-0513. And when you reach out to First Class Glazing, mention this podcast, The Nick Cattle Show, and you can get a free estimate plus 10% off. So check those guys out. Before I get to more thoughts about this free agency situation, Shooter McGavin sends a super chat. Thank you, Shooter. This is something actually that I tweeted out before we started here about 15, 20 minutes ago. You can follow me on Twitter. Where is it? Right there on the edge at Nick C Radio. Is Mariota going to Washington a tell that they draft Jaden Daniels? I think it's very interesting. As I tweeted, I think it's very interesting that the Washington Commanders today agreed to a contract with Mariota. Because if you're looking at Mariota, he's very similar to Jaden Daniels. If you look at style of play, Mariota is much more like Jaden Daniels than he is Drake May. And you would argue that Jacoby Brissett is more like Drake May. So if you're trying to read the tea leaves, it could lead you to believe that Washington is more likely to draft Daniels and the Patriots are more likely to draft May. And of course, the Patriots, they don't have much of a say in this unless they move up. They're drafting the guy who's left over. If they love all three quarterbacks, May drops to them, they're drafting May. If it's Daniels, then they're going to draft Daniels. But I do think it's fascinating. It's fascinating that the Commanders signed a quarterback in the free agency market that mirrors Daniels more than May, something to keep in mind as we get closer to the draft. Boss Hog jumps in with a super chat again. You can get to the front of the line with your question or comment with a super chat, and also you help contribute financially to the program. Is the timing of this free agent class poor for the Pats when they had this much cap space with the cap increase and lack of superstar talents at O-line wide receiver? You can look at it that way, Boss Hog. I actually think that the timing is pretty good for the Patriots because, again, when you look at the draft, tackle and wide receiver very deep. At the end of the day, as they like to say, at the end of the day, if it comes down to money, then none of that matters, right? Like Calvin Ridley, to me, is a number one receiver. If he's looking for the most money, Patriots pay him the most money, he will be a Patriot. I kind of start to get this feeling in my stomach that what we're seeing right now is Ridley trying to leverage the Patriots to get a better deal from either Jacksonville or somewhere else. And if he doesn't get that better deal, then he might sign with the Patriots. But I think he's waiting this thing out a little bit and seeing if the Patriots are willing to give him even more money than what is on the table, or if another team is willing to step up and pay him a little bit more than what they have on the table. But you can look at this and you can say, because of, as we just talked about, the tackle and wide receiver classes being so deep, that opens up opportunity for the Patriots, who have this cap space, to come over the top, because these other teams are not going to be as urgent at getting those positions in-house. So you can kind of look at it that way too. All right, King Cato, 21, with a super chat. Again, front of the line, comment, question with your super chat. Did Rager get signed to a one-year depth backup or prove-it contract? Yes, he did, King Cato. Jalen Rager signed 1 year. That became official later in the night last night. It's a 1 year veteran minimum contract, pretty much. To me, it's, hey, look, Rager's got speed. He can give you some juice in the kick return game. But most of all, what Rager does is he puts Tyquan Thornton's feet to the fire. And that's why I would bring him back if I were the Patriots, Rager. Because if I'm looking at Jalen Rager, and I said, look, Jalen Rager a week or two ago, I said, see ya, he can go. Because I don't think it's a necessity. But if you can get him to come back on a 1 year vet minimum deal, there's really no risk financially. If he doesn't make the team, you throw him on the practice squad. He was on the practice squad a year ago, so you can stash him if you need to. But what he does is he creates this competition with Tyquan Thornton, because now Thornton looks across the field and you have another vertical threat. So now Thornton, you want to bring the intensity to Thornton and motivate him and see. This is a huge year for Thornton. I mean, if he doesn't show out in any way in camp, I think he's going to get cut. So how do you try to put even more pressure on your former second-round pick? You bring back Jalen Rager and you say, all right, now you got to beat Jalen Rager out. You have competition with somebody. You're not the only fast guy that can get downfield now on this football team. Ken Weber with a big-time super chat. Thank you, Ken. $20 super chat. Can't say enough about the super chats, but especially when you're throwing $20 into the till, I very much appreciate it. Patience, young Padawans. This front office knows what they're doing. Keep it up, Nick. Great job. Thank you, Ken. Yeah, like I saw a lot of people, and look, this happens all the time, and Ken brings up patience. And I think Ken is being very, very intelligent about approaching this free agency the way he is, because I see people, the natural reaction to not signing a big name right off the bat. And by the way, Michael Wenu is a big name. I know he's your own guy, but he's a big freaking name. He's one of the best offensive linemen in this free agency class. He's ranked as a top 20, top 25 guy pretty much across the board by every outlet. He's a big name. And people don't get as excited because Michael Wenu's already a Patriot, as if it doesn't matter bringing him back when he's one of the top free agents out there. I digress. But people, they start to get impatient. And I'm guilty. Impatience is a weakness of mine. I try to be as patient as humanly possible. I tend to be impatient. I have terrible anxiety. I'm on about 3 hours of sleep today because of it. Okay? So I'm being hypocritical here. But being patient is the best advice. Until I start seeing Tyron Smith, Jonah Williams, Mekhi Becton, until I start to see the top 2 or 3 tackles fly off the board, I'm not freaking out. Calvin Ridley, until he signs somewhere, I'm not going to say, oh man, they swung and missed. And let's not forget that you can always pivot. If they miss out on Ridley, what's plan B? I would imagine they have a plan B. So when I look at this, and we talk about what happens on a day-to-day basis because that's what we do. That's the job, right? But I do think it's borderline silly to try to evaluate an offseason until you get to early May. I mean, you can give your grade-by-grade analysis, and you can say, I don't like how this is going. I love how this is going. I love this signing. I hate that signing. But to make some grand proclamation on March 12th about your team's offseason is silly. It's over-the-top debate television silliness. That's what they can do. I'm not focused on that. I'm focused on the day-to-day stuff, telling you how I feel about it, but I'm not going to sit here and say, Patriots offseason, F on March 12th. A lot of things can happen. A lot of things can happen from now until then. Another thing when I think about Andrew Callahan and some people saying, this start to the offseason has been very Belichickian by Eliot Wolf, which I vehemently disagree with. They're paying top of the market prices for their own guys, right? With no hesitation. Michael Wenu, $19 million a year. Hunter Henry, $8.5 million a year. Kyle Duggar, transition tag, $13.8 million. These are top of the market prices on their own players. That's not very Belichickian, is it? The urgency with their own players, not necessarily Belichickian. The fact that, I'll use that word again, urgency from Eliot Wolf to address tackle depth days before this free agency period began is not very Belichickian. You're not going to wait around and then sign Riley Reif and Calvin Anderson off the trash heap. It's going out there and getting one of the better guys available as soon as you can. That's not Bill Belichick, at least not the last 4 or 5 years. Appreciating the quarterback position and nailing down a veteran quarterback like Jacoby Brissett on the first day of free agency, that's not necessarily Belichickian. Belichick would be waiting for Brian Hoyer until July. So I disagree with this idea that, this is just more Belichickian stuff. Disagree with it, man. A lot of different things tell you this is not Belichickian. I think this front office has a firm grasp and understanding of 2024 and what you need in the NFL. Cutting Chris Board is not very Belichickian. Getting rid of special teams devoted guys that waste roster spots. That's not Belichick. Cutting Devontae Parker, certainly not Belichick. Just gave him an extension less than a year ago. That's not Belichickian. Going out on the first day and signing a third down back like Antonio Gibson. So I don't like the narrative. Don't forget, give us that thumbs up. First time I've done this, 19 minutes deep into this podcast. Give us a like. All the thumbs mean the world to us. Telling you the first couple days of this week have been the busiest days of this podcast's existence, and it's not by accident, not a coincidence. More people are liking the product online, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. More likes means we are expanding the brand, expanding our reach means the world to us. And subscribe. The goal is 2,500 subscriptions by April 1st. We're already less than 100 away. We made a pretty good jump last night with that podcast on Mike Owenu. If you missed it, check it out on the channel. So don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Also, rate and review on Spotify, Apple Pods, and Patreon. I'm going to give you a plug here. Patreon.com/Nick Cattle, Cattles. It launched yesterday. Exclusive content to Patreon members that you can't get with this podcast. Last night, we did our very first pod on the Patreon page. Tomorrow night, We will do another exclusive ad-free podcast on the Patreon page. We also have mailbag set up. We will do a Q&A hangout a couple times a month, and I'm working on a chat option as well. So patreon.com/Nick Cattle, Cattles, $5 a month. It's $1.25. As I said, swap one of your pints. If you're into that kind of thing, swap a pint for the Patreon. Just one pint, $5. Patreon.com/Nick Cattles. We have another super chat from Joe. Been a fan since the Jones days. Great coverage. Sorry, it's Jay, not Joe. My eyes, 3 hours sleep. Thank you, Jay, Mr. Tapia. Fan since the Jones days. Those shows were something else. I had a few emotional shows with Adam Jones in my time at 98.5 The Sports Hub. Adam remains a friend. I think he's a great dude. And we have hung out outside of the show and actually get along really, really well for people that might be surprised by that. But I appreciate you. All right, let's jump to the next thing here. And the next thing is there are still lots of names available. Still lots of names. I mean, I started to look at the list of free agents that are still available last night. I'm like, wait a minute. This is a buttload of names. We're not talking about the Patriots swinging and missing and not having anything available to them on day two. It's the complete opposite. When you look at what markets were busy yesterday, the running back market was busy. That continued today with Aaron Jones going to Minnesota on the 1-year, $7 million contract. The edge market was very busy. The offensive guard market was busy with big fat deals. The quarterback market was busy. And I would also say linebackers were busy yesterday. So running backs, Patriots got one of them, right? They got their third down back. Offensive guard, offensive line, Mike Owenu, part of the puzzle. Quarterback, they got their guy in Jacoby Brissett. Linebacker, they got our guy. One of my favorite names in all of sports, and it was one of my favorite names before he became a Patriot. Just ask my wife, Kelly. Every time a Browns game would be on and this guy would make a play, I would, like a 5-year-old child, scream, Taki Taki. Sion Taki Taki is your linebacker from yesterday, right? So out of the markets that were moving, the Patriots addressed some of those. But here's the good news. When you look at receiver, tackle, safety, and even edge, even though there's a lot of guys that moved yesterday that play the edge, that play the defensive line, there are still a number of names that are available on the edge market. And this is what we do here with this show. We give you those names. The alternative to some of the sports talk, not that they do it wrong, we just do it different. We're going to actually give you names, right? So when you look at receiver, when you look at tackle, when you look at safety, when you look at edge, here are the guys that are still available for the Patriots, okay? Let's start with receiver. Calvin Ridley, we know, all in, hope they get him. If you don't get Calvin Ridley, you get Hollywood Brown, who to me is really better than anyone you have on this roster right now. He brings you the speed element, and I think he's a good fit within this offense, and he's still really young. So Hollywood Brown is a guy that might get you some interest. You've got Darnell Mooney, who to me is the discount version of Hollywood Brown. He's out there. How about Tyler Boyd? I'm interested in Tyler Boyd. I wonder how much he was impacted by T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. I mean, you're not going to get a lot of footballs thrown your way. Boyd is an interesting name. Curtis Samuel is somebody. He's a solid 2/3 receiver. He does lots of damage in space. I think he'd be a good fit with this offense. How about Josh Reynolds from the Lions? Great fit within the system. Played for the Rams, Sean McVay, Shanahan tree, right? Kubiak, that West Coast tree. So I think he'd be a good fit offensively. He also played, as we know, the last couple of years in Detroit. And there are some similarities between Detroit's offense and what Ben Johnson likes to do and what Alex Van Pelt, I believe, likes to do, especially with the run game and using your receivers off the run game and having your receivers block in the run game. So Josh Reynolds is another name. So look, you got Ridley out there. You've got Hollywood Brown, Darnell Mooney, Tyler Boyd, Curtis Samuel, Josh Reynolds, and you've got Odell Beckham Jr. If you want to take a flyer, and again, you want somebody to compete with Jalen Reagor and Tyquan Thornton, OBJ could be that guy. Long in the tooth, wasn't spectacular last year with Baltimore, but he is somebody that could pay dividends on a cheap kind of deal. So you still have receivers to look at. Obviously, the top name is Calvin Ridley. Tackle, we mentioned some of these guys already, still available. Tyron Smith played 14 games last year, second team All-Pro. He's had some injury issues, but if you can keep him healthy, he is a bona fide, legitimate left tackle. He'd be a great addition to the Patriots. Jonah Williams is still out there. Solid tackle, versatile, has played both the right side and the left side at the NFL level, only 26 years old. You also have Mekhi Becton. Now, he's got tons of talent. He is a humongous human being, freak athleticism for his size, but he's had a number of injuries, and I mentioned size for a reason. He's had some trouble keeping his weight down, but he's only 24 years old. If you believe that Scott Peters, offensive line coach, and this coaching staff can get to Mekhi Becton, and Becton looks at this and says, man, I went from a very top pick in the NFL draft to now trying to scrape together a free agency deal, maybe you'll get a very motivated Mekhi Becton on a 1 or 2 year deal, and you put him in the room with Scott Peters, and you try to get the most out of that talent. So you still have tackles available to you. Edge, a lot of edge players off the market after yesterday, but you still have a number of names. Danielle Hunter, somebody we talked about, more than 70 pressures, a ton of sacks. I mean, this is a guy who produces off the edge, gets to the quarterback. So you've got Danielle Hunter as the top option still out there for me. Jadeveon Clowney, he had 9.5 sacks last year for Baltimore. He's 31 years old. I think he still has gas in the tank. Chase Young, former top pick of Washington, right? Traded to San Francisco during the season in 2023. He has an off and on mentality, but he's incredibly talented. He hasn't been the same guy since the ACL tear. But again, similarly to Mekhi Becton, do you bring in somebody like Chase Young and you get a motivated Chase Young? It's a wake-up call kind of deal, right? And you sign a 1-year deal, 2-year deal, and you say, hey, man, if you want to go back into the free agency world next offseason, be our guest. But we'll give you the deal right now. We'll do the best that we can coaching you up, and you can try to get your NFL career going again. I think he is a very interesting option. Calais Campbell, oldie but goodie, still effective at like 100 years old. This guy still produces, and he's a great veteran leader. So Calais Campbell's still out there. And look, if you want to still take a swing at Josh Uche, he might come cheaper than he thought. And I know they haven't offered him anything yet, or at least they didn't offer him anything before yesterday's extravaganza began. But could you run Josh Uche back on a 1-year deal? So you still have options at edge. You have top-tier options. You have some interesting swings at edge, but there is still talent there waiting to be plucked. Back to Jay Tapia. The easy stuff wasn't being done. Well put last night. Thank you, Jay. Yeah, a lot of people, I keep seeing people say, oh man, this, it's so the easy stuff. All Eliot Wolf is doing is the easy stuff. This is paint by numbers. Offensively, we didn't get much paint by numbers the last 4 years. And that's why they're in the situation that they're in right now. The easy stuff wasn't getting done. You could look at a team and you can say, get a third down back as a safety valve for your quarterback. That seems to be an easy idea. The Patriots haven't done it since James White. You can look at it and say, try to get offensive tackle depth early so you're not freaking out, right? Try to get somebody, if somebody's available that you think is good, is a quality tackle, and you can get that guy before free agency begins, go out there and do what you can. And that's what they did with Chucks Okorafor. So they bring him in. I mean, yes, these are simple ideas. A veteran quarterback to either be a bridge guy or to help guide a young quarterback. Seems like a very simple idea, but it's something that Belichick failed doing. Last year for Mac Jones, he bet on Bailey Zappi, and that bet backfired. They cut the guy before the season started. That's why they had 20-plus moves at quarterback, 20-plus transactions last year. So, yeah, I agree that this stuff is seemingly easy, but the easy stuff wasn't getting done. All right, let's get back to the free agents that are still available. You want a free safety? I've got a free safety for you. How about Justin Simmons? He's still on the market. C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Cameron Carl, Julian Blackmon, Jordan Fuller, Jordan Whitehead, all safeties, all still on the market. You want a cornerback? I would love a cornerback. Cornerback is deep. I mean, some of the top guys are still out there. And I'm not even counting L'Jarius Sneed via trade. Kendall Fuller, still out there. Stephon Gilmore, talked about signing him to a one-year deal for $10 or $11 million and why that would make sense. Stephon Gilmore is still available. Steven Nelson is still available. Kenny Moore, old friend. You can play in the slot, has some versatility. He is still available. Some of the best cornerbacks in this market are still out there, and I think several of those guys that I just mentioned could help the Patriots. Still available. How about a tight end? You want a tight end too? My off-season offensive free agency preview, that's a mouthful, that I did a few weeks ago. I had Hunter Henry coming back, and I had Gerald Everett as your tight end too. Gerald Everett, you guessed it, still available. Even if you like linebackers, how about Patrick Queen? You want to drop money on a top-notch linebacker and make a jump in athleticism on the second level? Patrick Queen's available. Levante David is available. Bobby Wagner, who, yes, is 100 years old, but had a ridiculously productive season a year ago. He's available, and so is Devin White. So the point is, you still have a lot of people out there that can help this football team at positions of need. So I would take a deep breath. Take a deep breath. There's a plausible scenario. I'm not telling you it's likely. Plausible scenario that you could still get Calvin Ridley, Gerald Everett, Jonah Williams, Cam Curl, Chase Young, and Stephon Gilmore. All of those guys are available. It's more than possible. It's more than believable. It's plausible, certainly, that you could go out there and get those names. And if you added just 2 or 3 of those names, I think a lot of people would say, oh, wait a minute. Wow, man, this free agency is a banger. By the way, the Texans have traded for Joe Mixon. That's an interesting move. The Dolphins are signing Shaq Barrett, pass rusher. So that is also getting done. I'm just kind of whipping through my Twitter timeline right now to give you guys the latest. Make sure I haven't missed anything. But Joe Mixon traded to Houston. Houston was in on a couple of backs. They were in on Saquon Barkley. They were interested in some others. And so they get their running back by making that deal with Cincy. Joe Mixon now to the Houston Texans. Reported just a few moments ago. All right. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment. All the likes mean the world to us. Give us that like on YouTube if you enjoy the content, if you enjoy this product, if you enjoy the alternative to some of the other stuff that's out there here in Boston. So give us that thumbs up. Comments, I love all of them. Super chats, that's how I get to see your comment because, I mean, there's just so many flying through during a show like today. If you want to jump the line, you do that via Super Chat. And you also obviously contribute to the program financially. Rate and review, Spotify, Apple Pods, and Patreon. Patreon.com/Nick Cattles. Check out the details on that Patreon page. $5 a month, $1.25 a week. And one more reminder, trying to hit 2,500 subscriptions by April 1st. We're less than 100 away from that. So let's keep on cooking. Let's keep on pushing and building that momentum. Patriots have lots of money. There are lots of names left. We still have the draft in April. Take a breath. All right. Some quick thoughts on the deals yesterday before we get out of here. And just like yesterday, if something happens that is significant, if Calvin Ridley signs, you can bet your tuk-tuk that we will be back here doing a breaking news podcast. Now, I am scheduled to record with Greg Bedard, so the big boy might get in the way, but I will do a breaking news podcast if something big happens later in the day. All right, let's dive a little bit deeper into some of the signings yesterday. Antonio Gibson, again, he's a perfect third down back. And when I say perfect third down back, you want a guy who can catch the football. He's a former college receiver. Phil Perry tweeted this yesterday. He's had at least 40 receptions each of the last 3 years. Pro Football Focus, by the way, on Antonio Gibson, he had a 76.7 PFF receiving grade over the last 2 years. That ranks him 7th among running backs with at least 200 routes. So Antonio Gibson's receiving grade over the last 2 seasons per Pro Football Focus ranks him 7th in the league at running back. He's been really good catching the football, folks. Been really good. And when you're a third down back, you also have to pass protect. Andrew Callahan tweeted, Gibson graded 5th in pass blocking among running backs with 50-plus snaps in pass protection last year. You want to know who's 4th on that list? Ramondre Stevenson. So now you have the 4th and 5th best pass protecting backs in football. That's how you protect your quarterback. Jerry Thornton had Gibson 3rd. So I'm not really sure if it's 3rd or 5th, but it's good either way. You wonder about scheme fit. Taylor Kyles tweeted this. Gibson should be a great fit in Alex Van Pelt's wide zone scheme. He has the speed to get outside, shows the vision and efficient footwork to cap back inside, make penetrators miss, also complements his big frame with good balance to run through arm tackles and fall forward through contact. How good is Antonio Gibson after contact? Andrew Callahan posted. Gibson averaged more than 3.5 rushing yards after contact, which was 4th highest among running backs with 60-plus carries. So again, just to give you a picture of who Antonio Gibson is as a running back. He is highly effective and impactful when it comes to catching the football. He is very good in pass protection. He's very tough to bring down. He gets a bunch of yards after contact. And we've said this about Alex Van Pelt's system and what he's going to want. He wants yak. He wants yards after the catch. He wants yards after contact. He wants all of that extra yardage. Now, not everything is great about Gibson. He's worn down a little bit the past couple of years, and he has a bad fumbling problem. At least he did last year. Callahan tweeted that Gibson has about one fumble every 29 touches. Not great. So you do have obvious weaknesses as well. But I think for the money and for the need, makes a lot of sense. He's also a downfield threat at running back. Don't overlook that. He can test defenses vertically, which is something the Patriots haven't had at running back in forever. A guy that can truly get downfield and test linebackers on a consistent basis. Gibson can do that. All right, let's get to my guy, Sione Takitaki, athletic off the ball linebacker. He is your replacement for Mack Wilson. Every time I see this guy play, I can just tell you from what I've seen. Seemingly every time I watch Sione Takitaki play football, he makes plays. So I've seen him flash a number of times watching the Browns. He was there with Eliot Wolf and Alonzo Highsmith, so those guys had a role in drafting Takitaki. And this was from Corey Kinnan, who covers the Browns out there in Cleveland. Taylor Kyles tweeted this out with some background. Takitaki, historically a Sam, up until 2022. The Browns saw both of their Mike linebackers get hurt, so Takitaki kicked over and learned the Mike on the fly. He played some will in a pinch as well. Really solid run defender, sturdy tackler, really thrives at gap integrity, setting a strong edge in base looks. That screams Patriot. That screams Gerard Mayo, DeMarcus Covington defense. Solid, smart, athletic, contains the edge, got a 2-year deal. I'm fine with it. And we talked about Jalen Reagor a little bit earlier in the show. Vet min deal, 1-year deal. Don't have to worry about, holding on to Jalen Reagor if you don't want to. You can push him to the practice squad. He's wide receiver depth with some speed, and he competes with Tyquan Thornton at that spot. So don't hate it. Whatever. It's a 1-year deal, vet min. Not like they're overpaying Jalen Reagor, okay? I want to go bananas about that. Neither high nor low on that one. Just challenge Tyquan Thornton and see if you can get some life out of that guy. Please, for the love of God. Like, comment, subscribe, rate, and review. The Patreon launched last night. First podcast was dropped last night. Patreon.com/Nick Cattles. I'm out of here for now. Something big happens. We will do a breaking news podcast. I'm back tomorrow if nothing happens, and hopefully that's not the case, at 11 a.m. But until I talk to you next time, I appreciate you. Continue to support this program, expand the brand, get more eyeballs, build this community. Thank you so much. Like, comment, subscribe. We'll talk to you soon. It's the Nick Cattle Show.